Hello and welcome back to the Cinch YouTube channel, where today we are driving a Vauxhall Grandland, which, well, let's just cut to the chase. It's going to be another boring SUV, isn't it? Or is it?
Yep, the mainstream brand that once turned the sensible Zafira and Meriva people carriers into wild VXR models is having a crack at creating a hot SUV in the manner of the Mercedes AMG GLE 35 or Cupra Formentor. And with a 1.6 litre petrol engine up front, working in tandem with two electric motors, this Grandland wears its GSe badges to the tune of 300 horsepower and 520 Nm of torque, which is positively hot.
Alright, yes, it does look like this car's been tuned to appeal to your company car buyers after a lower tax bracket, but with sporty suspension and some decent looks, there might be a private buyer or two out there who fancies this as a fun all-rounder. Let's find out. Before we hit the road though, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and of course if you fancy a Vauxhall for yourself, check out cinch.co.uk or download our app where we've got plenty available. So, with 300 horsepower, this thing promises to be quite entertaining, and I can tell you, it is genuinely quick. It will accelerate with that electric torque right away, and then the 1.6 turbo engine up front does do a decent job of hauling you forward. It is actually a sports SUV from Vauxhall. It is their flagship model though, to be honest, so it had to have something up its sleeve, and at over 43 grand as well, it needs to feel a little bit more interesting. So they've done a good job there, but it isn't quite as sharp around bends as I thought it might be. Now, if I put it into the correct mode, into sport mode, you can feel the accelerator sharpen up, it picks up nicely. There's a bit of hesitation from the 8-speed automatic gearbox, but once it figures out where it wants to be, there is genuine thrust. But then around the bends, there's not that much in the way of communication. It's a bit muted, this car. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the 508 we drove recently. The 508 is definitely a step above in the performance sense and in the quality sense overall, but it's also a lot more money. But similarly, this car just doesn't quite get you engaged around the bends. So if I come up to a corner here and I just start to apply some steering lock, the steering's quite numb, it feels keen, but it doesn't feel like a sports car overall. But does that really matter? Probably not, because what this car does offer is really effortless performance, and it combines that with a load of driver assistance features that make driving down the motorway and even some twisty roads much easier. And of course, because this is a hybrid car, and it's a plug-in hybrid car by the way, which can be charged at the plug, or you can use the engine as a generator to charge it up, although that does mean you won't achieve anything close to the claimed miles per gallon figures. But because it's got all these different systems aboard, it means it can also be a much more sensible car. Now, if I click it into electric mode, which I can use for a claimed 42 miles according to Vauxhall, everything just quietens down, and it is genuinely quick enough to keep up with city traffic and actually accelerate you onto a dual carriageway or onto a motorway, although that range is only going to be good enough for your average commuter there and back. Anything further and you're best to leave the car to its own devices in hybrid mode. Do that, and actually, again, the systems work perfectly well. There's nothing exciting about this setup when you drive it normally. It doesn't sound particularly interesting, but that kind of isn't what it's supposed to be like. It's supposed to be calming and easy to drive, and that it definitely is. The only thing is that because this car has a slightly sporty edge, it does mean that the ride is a tad firm. It can be a bit jiggly over certain surfaces, and there's noticeable road noise on our current road surface here. It's a coarse surface, but on the motorway, there was a little bit of a hiss in the background, although overall, the car does feel pretty refined. Visibility is good as well. Big chunky door mirrors that are very tall as well as wide, and I'm peering over the bonnet here. I've got the seat as low as it will go, but I still feel like I'm in an SUV, which is going to appeal to a lot of buyers. And this car can claim to some extent to be a proper SUV because of course it is all-wheel drive. There are a few features in this car though that do feel a little bit old school. I mean, it's got some up-to-date technology underneath it, but the reversing camera firstly is pretty low resolution. So while the visibility is good and it's very easy to park this thing, you do look into quite a low resolution image when you're reversing. But by contrast, you do get some really good driver assistance features, including adaptive cruise control. You've also got speed limiter, and you've got steering assist, which does work very well. I tested it on the way here, and on the motorway, it will take out all of the effort from steering for around 10 seconds actually before it starts to beep at you to grip the steering wheel more firmly. So you only have to have your hands rested on the wheel, and otherwise the car does all of the work for you, both accelerator and brake, and also controlling the helm. And talking of technology, it's worth pulling over and looking at the features this car gets as standard. So much is standard in this cabin. Now, pulling over and looking at this interior in more detail, it is clear that this is not the most exciting place to sit, far from it. It feels like a Grandland, which is to say, it's got sensible items. There's a lot of digital stuff ahead of me, but you've got some analog as well. But they have spruced it up a tad with some GSe trimmings, especially when it comes to the seats. You've got badges and some contrasting stitching to make it feel a bit more interesting. And they're actually quite comfortable as well, albeit very firm in the cushioning sense. I guess if you've got a bad back, this will be great. But if you want to relax, maybe not the car to do it in. When it comes to using the tech, I mean, you've got stuff in this Vauxhall that works, but I just defaulted to Apple CarPlay because it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. The stuff ahead of you though is nice and sharp. You've got a lot of information and you can understand how the car is using its energy, a mixture between electric and petrol. So it means you can be smart with your driving, or if you want, just leave it to its own devices. Let's see how it is in the back though, because of course this is going to be a family car for many people, so rear legroom is going to matter. So the back of the car here is, well, firstly, not quite as big as you might have expected if you're looking at an SUV, but this isn't a massive car, and you do have generous amounts of knee room here, and I can fit my feet under the seat ahead despite it being as low as it will go. Also, you might have noticed I've got a good amount of headroom above me here, so it is actually quite a comfortable car, even if not the biggest in the class. Now, the middle seat looks pretty wide, but before we check it out, I can show you that there is a nice wide armrest here with 2 cup holders, and there is a ski hatch as well down here. So to go with the standard fit roof racks you get on this car, you've also got space to poke longer items through there. Now, the middle seat for passengers, if I smooth over, is not too bad. It's quite wide as a seat itself, and the tunnel through the middle of the floor here isn't big at all. In fact, it's almost flat on the floor, so your space for your feet is not too bad. You're also confronted with 2 air vents, although there are no USB-C or USB chargers down in that middle bit there, which may be a negative if you've got kids with devices that consume a lot of energy. But in terms of comfort, it's all right back here. When it comes to the boot, which is going to be important given that this is an SUV, you've got an automatic tailgate, which is very handy, and the space isn't too bad at all. It's almost square in its size, so it's not too deep, but there's a nice section of loading room here. And while it's not a flat floor, to get heavier items in, that might be a bit tricky. You do get some underfloor storage. There's place to put the cables down here, so they're nice and hidden. And if you lift the floor up to go with this extra bit here, you've got another section under there. So if you want to hide stuff in the boot, I mean, of course it's hidden by this parcel shelf, but if you want to make sure it's doubly hidden or just make use of more room, it's a good, if not excellent, boot. So while the Grandland GSe definitely does what it says on the tin in terms of performance, it's quick enough and it will get down a road very effectively. It isn't the most exciting car to drive, although that doesn't really matter in this category. Of course, many of the buyers for this are looking for its efficiency and its ease of use while having a slightly sporty flavour, and in that sense, it nails the brief entirely. The problem it has is that there's so much else out there, so it's got a lot to compete and to get people like yourself interested in it. But when it comes to its honest offering, yeah, I can recommend this car as a purchase. Although I have a feeling most of this car's buyers are probably going to be company car related. I mean, this is a tax bracket ticking machine, and it does that very well indeed, so fair play, Vauxhall. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, click the thumbs up button, and of course subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. See you soon.